Hi all, and welcome to today's episode of the Fintech Show, where we're going to be discussing the payments ecosystem, digital payments, e-commerce, and how they've all been impacted by the coronavirus. Now, joining me today is none other than Jukka, the head of digital solutions at Gieseke and Devrient. And Jukka and I actually had an interview a couple of years ago on the Fintech Show back in Munich. But here today, because of Corona, in the virtual arena, Jukka, could you actually give our audience a bit of an introduction and a bit of background to your role at Gieseke? And how have you seen payments change in the years leading up to Corona?
Okay, thank you, Doug. Happy to be here again. And yes, so G&D, representing G&D, as you said, looking for the digital solutions. That's part of the G&D business, especially we are targeting for the payment industry, but we have a background of all the way from the paper notes, printing, cash. So currency business is still a big part of our business, but then of course all the card business, and then nowadays of course more and more digital, both for the let's say the point of sales, enabling that one as well as the online too. To your question, so how has payment changed over the couple of last years before this strange times hit us due to the COVID-19? I think that there are of course a lot of developments which has taken place, but I would pick two main things. The other one is that mobiles, they are everywhere. I mean, mobile is the way we do banking and a lot of financial services and more payments, whether it's a kind of a bank transfers, making bills and invoices, but also nowadays more and more doing both point of sale, so really physical payments when we are using our Apple Pays, Google Pays, our issuer wallets. So that's one thing which really has changed. So this is the delivery channel for the banks for all their services, including payment. The other one, which is same time changed, especially in the let's say the physical side of the payment is, and that's very dear to us also because we are producing cards, is that contactless payment has become the thing in the world. So I mean, if you want to go and buy something nowadays in most of the countries, you don't want to anymore enter your card on a reader, enter your PIN. You just want to tap and you want to go. So this is the other thing which has really changed, I would say, on a global scale. If we look a couple of years back, yes, there were countries which had a contactless payment, but now it's everywhere. And maybe actually this brings to the third topic which has changed is of course the online payment. So that has kind of had a phenomenal growth rate over the last decade already, but now even more and more during the last couple of years.
Incredible, yeah. I mean, I completely agree how contactless payment is now everywhere, especially in Europe, but obviously Asia just in a different form of the QR. So kind of following on from your third point, what has been the main driver behind e-commerce innovation? Has it been the customer demand for the new e-commerce products? Or do you think it's been e-commerce companies and their R&D departments actually driving innovation and customers liking the innovations that they provide?
In my opinion, actually, the main driver is, of course, the kind of internet, because that's kind of the platform which has been there now for some times, but now most of the companies who operate using the internet connectivity, and that comes also to the retailers or merchants. I mean, now there are the last 5 years, especially the huge capabilities actually to offer your services online, and that of course means that now there is an offering and there is a demand of course too. So people are so interested to go online shopping. It's so easy, you can pick and choose, you can compare, there is a lot of sites to do that one, and it's easy then to buy, get the home delivery, and then make also of course the payment. So I think that this of course kind of enabled everything. but I also believe that this is, of course, driven by the consumer experience, like you said. So it's not just that you can do this, let's say, easy buying and purchases, but it's also that people feel secure when they do buy online. And that then I would say has been very much complemented probably the technology side. And here I would cover payment schemes, for example. They have put a lot of money to ensure that the consumers are well authenticated when they go shopping, online shopping, and then that when they do their payment transaction, it's also secured. This is an example, for example, that and then maybe one more point is that the regulations are also let's say part of that one, because when, for example, there is a fraudulent use, if you as a consumer have used your card in the right manner, you are kind of secured. So then it's the merchant or your issuing bank who takes actually those liabilities, which gives assurance for us as a consumer that, okay, it's fine to buy, and if then there is a breach, I'm not guilty for that one, of course, unless I did something wrong. So I think that those are probably the factors impacting here.
Well, it sounds absolutely brilliant for a consumer having this kind of effective risk-free ability to spend, which I think is kind of what e-commerce was always meant to be about. But obviously, if the risk is then attached to the financial institutions with this incredible new technology that seems to innovate every single day, I swear we see a new e-commerce innovation. How can financial institutions actually keep up with these changing demands and the increased risk on their side?
That is, of course, a big challenge, especially because they are regulated. So you need to, first of all, comply with all the regulations. Regulations like nowadays in Europe, we have PSD2 saying that you need to have a strong customer authentication. You do at the same time need to open up your APIs that third party can, for example, with the consent of the user, get some information available. And then of course, the technology, the development is very rapid, so it's kind of accelerated, which means that usually the investment needs to be high, and then same time you need to be able to provide these very complex services in a way which requires a lot of security in a nice user-friendly way. So that's usually the traditional dilemma, that okay, user-friendly, okay, it's probably less secure, or if it's more secure, probably less user-friendly. But I think that how the banks, if we look the issuing banks, that side of the equation, not so much acquiring, they have learned a lot during the last years, and I think that one of the implications is that they have taken, for example, the mobile banking app development in-house. Typically, most of the banks do that in-house because they see that this is a replacement for their traditional channels like online or then branches. And when you have this kind of capabilities in-house, it means that then you master that technology, you can also cope with the pace. And then I think that it's an industry-wide collaboration. So there are networks, there are issuers, there are acquirers, and then also the vendor communities like us. So we are all contributing to that one, both on the, let's say, security and the user friendliness, also performance side. And finally, this makes it happen. From the security point of view, I think you cannot do it alone. So you are always dependent on somebody else. The issuer is dependent on how the whole transaction flows goes from acquiring all the way to the networks back to you as an issuer. And then you have the devices, you have software, you have hardware. So it needs to be this kind of a coherent end-to-end security. So and that's I think this kind of I would call it a system-wide security, for example, is the thing how you can actually assure that your implementations are up to date and they also respond to the consumer needs.
Definitely. And I've got to ask, one of the large regulations effectively that might level this playing field between the risk and obviously SCA. Do you think that's going to change the role of the bank when it comes to this risk? And do you think, as you say, It's going to increase that kind of level playing field where everyone has a part to play and sharing some of this risk. And what do you think that's going to mean for e-commerce going into the future?
Well, I think it's good from the whole, let's say, keeping the ecosystem on the level that there is a possibility to make secure payments and keep consumers happy, keep merchants happy, and therefore, of course, let's say the financial industry too, meaning issuers, acquiring, and all that. Strong customer authentication is, of course, just 3 words, and more the challenge typically comes how you implement that one. And there are initiatives, like I mentioned, in Europe there are some, but also other regions similar. And then, of course, devil is always in the details. So, and we have seen already that it's not so easy because you need to have certain requirements, yes, fulfilled for the security, but really again matching on this consumer behavior. And therefore, for example, in Europe there are these waivers now given in many countries already twice, for example on these PSD2 requirements. What we see, for example, and how we'll try to help here is that we have now just very recently also announced that consumers can use also their EMV contactless card as a second strong form factor for strong authentication, which is a kind of a neat, in our opinion at least, opportunity to increase both the security, because now you really carry a smart card level secure hardware, and then people are used to tap already. Now they don't tap a point of sales terminal, they tap their own NFC phone, and this gives this kind of a assurance as well as then the good user experience. So I think that there are ways to do it, but then finally it's of course each issuer to decide, because the issuer carries the liability.
And following on from that, obviously G&D really covers so much of the payments ecosystem. And so when you see all these different touch points that consumers are now interacting with when it comes to a digital transaction, for instance, point of sale, within the online banks or even in e-commerce, how do they differ in security, and where does G&D work in between each one of these in this ecosystem?
Right. So we have been traditionally very much, of course, the issuance side, so helping issuers to provide means of payment. This comes, of course, all the way from a cash, but especially if we look the more, let's say, modern, that comes for the cards. So we help them really to issue these payment devices to the field, and of course certain life cycle management there. And when it goes to digital, the same thing. So we enable issuers to have their digital payment cards enabled in different type of wallets and endpoints. Now we are looking also very much, of course, the merchant sector, because the merchants are finally making the decisions how payments will be made available, what kind of a means you offer, and then on that sector, for example, we provide now services how you digitize your card on file, because that's the big market where, for example, Amazon just a week ago or so announced together with MasterCard that they will basically tokenize all their card on file, which means that then it's a consumer friendly way. You don't know it as a consumer that what I'm doing, but except that you are paying, that there is basically security behind, so that you are not compromising your original card if that token on the database of the merchant would be somehow compromised. Hopefully that doesn't happen, but should that happen, you can just delete the token or disable that one, and you can create a new token. You can continue paying without any kind of further interactions from the consumer. That's just one kind of a item. So I think that these are the playing fields where we want to play and help the community. And the other one, what I already was referring, is of course the authentication, and especially when we look strong customer or consumer authentication, because without knowing who is paying, that's also unsecure or insecure. Meaning that if I would get your card and I would do the payment, and if it's just allowed like that, okay, it's a fraudulent payment basically, because you haven't done that one. So you need to know that now Jukka is making the payment, and then the payment is secure. And those are the really areas where we want to contribute for the industry.
And we've kind of discussed the state of e-commerce and retail and payments leading up to the last 3 months. But I think it's become kind of a common saying now that the payments industry has changed, 20 years, 10 years, 5 years, and then in 3 months, the same amount of change, obviously because of the coronavirus. And what do you think the pandemic has actually done for payments when it comes to e-commerce and retail? And what will it mean for the future of these industries?
Right. So there has been, of course, you look almost any statistics now, so it has a huge impact on the payment side. There has been, of course, a lot of recommendations also by the banking associations, even governmental levels, that please use now more digital payments if possible. That could be a wallet or any kind of a mobile payments which are enabled in a particular country. Contactless, of course, because you don't need to now touch and make the physical contact. That has increased. And then if you look the growth rates of the online payments, so in UK, I think that in only, was it April, it was kind of a 78% higher number of online transactions compared to a year ago. And you can look almost any market, so there is a substantial growth compared to the trend which used to be still roughly in February timeframe. So it is a big impact. And then, of course, the question is that are these let's say convenient also for the consumers? And then you come easily to the questions that if there are regulations which require strong customer authentication, and you would need to do online payments, you would need to, I don't know, in some countries, for example, you have these separate hardware tokens which you need to then tap or generate some sort of a one-time code and then enter that one. Well, not really user friendly. So I think that is now also accelerated the developments in the how do we pay. So we can see that ourselves, for example, but also very much the industry has accelerated also developments to, especially for the online payments, because there we all see that where the market is going, and if you can enable that one, make it secure, make it a nice experience, that's the way to go.
Definitely. And who do you think will be the major players that are going to take advantage of these changes and trends?
Sorry, can you repeat?
Yeah, of course. Who do you think will be the more successful members of the payments ecosystem that can take advantage of, I hate to say take advantage of this pandemic, but obviously of the opportunities that have arisen from this changing part of the industry? Right.
That's a big question. I think it's an opportunity for sure, and we all probably agree that these big techs or IT giants have a really strong position in general everywhere within this world of the internet. And as we discussed earlier, so internet is kind of enabling a lot of the online payments, online shopping. And they have the means from many perspectives. They have, first of all, the access to the devices, or they are enabling us the devices, which are mobile phones, tablets, and all this. They have the hardware, they have the software, they have the services. Apple having Apple Pay, Apple Cash. Now they have a card. So what's next? So those and for example, just related to COVID, I mean, Google, Apple, they provided also very quickly nice APIs how you can enable, for example, tracking of the COVID infected people if then the app developers, governments would like to use or utilize that kind of capabilities. And actually many governments have already decided to do so. That means that, of course, these companies have a lot to gain. And I would say that they are also grabbing some of the market here. At the same time, if we look the let's say the traditional players, which are of course more kind of issuers, acquirers, the banking community, I think that they do have a chance, but they need to act again probably much faster, so that they can offer the trust, which is the I would say advantage that they have. But they have I think a fairly good also propositions in many markets on for example on their apps and wallets already by themselves, and they are finally the ones that we still have our money deposit on the accounts, and finally that's the having the account is the source of money for anything that we do, and as long as it stays within the banks, I think that they have a strong position. So and then of course one major player here is also the network. So they are the ones that enable a lot of these things. They have made this tokenization, for example, available. At the same time, they have the global networks. They have their certification scheme saying that well, wherever Jukka uses Visa card or MasterCard, it always works. It's a similar experience and all that. I think that they are also in a very good position. But at the same time, there is a lot of developments, for example, in instant payments, which means that you just actually transfer money from one account to another account without having a card or token in between. And of course, then that is maybe a threat for the networks as such. And if from the user experience point of view, this could be also very, very interesting for the consumers, and probably business-wise also, for example, the traditional players like banks, because the accounts are still within the issuing and acquiring banks. And yeah, but it is I would say really exciting times to look how this develops and evolves over the next few years. Not that much actually in the let's say far away future, but very, very near future.
And brilliant. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting to hear the banks still having that kind of role to play despite the changing nature of payments. And obviously, we've talked about SCA earlier slightly, but what do you think of the postponement of SCA in the UK? And do you think that the rest of Europe will follow suit?
My guess is that yes, probably, because as we already earlier also looked or discussed a little bit this PSD2, and then there is basically regulations, there is some technical documentation of what and how to implement, but not that it would say that you just need to do it from A to Z and then there it is, which means that every issuer, every country needs to make their own decisions on how to implement, for example, strong customer authentication. And we have seen that first of all, the regulations took a long time, and then the migration time was rather short because these are not easy things to implement. And then once you start doing these, you easily do a very good and secure, but then the user experience starts deteriorating, and that's what I have at least experienced myself, just doing the payments sometimes, and then suddenly you need to do something which you are not used to do. So forget it. So consumers get confused, they don't do the payments, or they try to find an alternative payment, or they go and buy the things somewhere else where they can use the traditional way of doing payments. So as this would be, I would say, very much the whole European-wide topic. So I foresee that there will be probably waivers or extensions in other countries. Will it be in every country? That I cannot say, but my bet would be that quite a few countries will still extend it.
Will extend it, yeah. It's certainly interesting. Even for yourself, who's in the payments industry, you're being presented with this new method of authentication, and it throws you immediately. Even though it's an added element of security, you don't trust it, which I think is going to be very interesting for a lot of people in the payments industry to have to navigate. And especially for people who aren't payments literate, it's going to be very interesting. But kind of looking at the, rather than the banks, looking more at the retailers and the e-tailers, obviously because of the pandemic, a lot of retailers are having to look at shifting their solutions to online and becoming digital. What do you think this is going to mean for a lot of retailers? And do you think we're going to see a lot of mom and pop shops, effectively, or SMEs, finally take the plunge, and we're going to finally get a vibrant e-tail ecosystem full of not just the large players that we've already seen in digital payments, but also the small shops finally getting involved on the digital e-tails?
I think it's in a way a must that everybody needs to be somehow kind of online enabled. Of course, there are platforms also for these kind of small shops to provide their services through different platforms. But of course, it's always challenging because there is a cost associated to this one, and you need to be a bit maybe tech savvy in a way. And if it's a really, like you said, mom and pop's shop, so they are private owned, might be just one individual owner who is basically doing everything for that merchant location, and that means that they would need to be the IT experts almost, or then buy the services from somebody, which then is a cost. So I think it's not that easy. Same time, personally, I feel still that there is probably some sort of a backlash on this one, so that people really want to go also to the physical stores and feel and see things. Probably, of course, not the mainstream. So you need to find your place, your niche on this one, whether you want to stay, let's say, on the physical world and then maybe have some sort of extension to the digital world and the online, or if you want to then fully migrate your services to the online world. The trend for sure is that the online will be dominating, and then there are, of course, this is creating, of course, other services around, like I think that in every country, like myself now, COVID has done that. I didn't do too much actually, for example, shopping, online shopping, but now what I have done is that I have ordered, of course, my lunch boxes online, delivered at home. So yeah, which I think that there really has made a big difference also, especially for the small retailers, because many of the restaurants, they were really suffering. Most of the countries, they closed the restaurant business, and this was the only way you could kind of offer services to your customers. And would there be or let's say the other way around, that if there wouldn't be these platforms like I don't know, in Europe there are the Wolts and the Foodoras, and in every country there is a few of these, which provides basically that you just sign up as a consumer, you have the app, and you pick, this is the restaurant, this is actually the meal I want to have, and I want to have it delivered home, and then payment is done and you get your food delivered. I mean, without these, I don't think that it would have been possible for most of the small restaurants to do that. They would have organized this kind of a home deliveries by themselves. So this again have accelerated. I mean, people have started to use more and more, and then same time the small businesses have noticed that, okay, this is the new way of doing business, and actually this could be actually very good and profitable business too.
I completely agree. I mean, purely anecdotal as well, but our studio was set in a quite small town just outside of London, and all the restaurants closed, obviously, for Corona. and they'd never been on the Just Eats or the Uber Eats. And then suddenly, Corona comes along, and then the whole town is now completely on Uber Eats and Deliveroo. So finally, because of the Corona, people can order it in a digital environment. Now, taking the time to look at the kind of big e-commerce players that have already existed before Corona, we've seen Klarna actually move, obviously, from this kind of very digital space, actually offering a physical card. I mean, what do you think this means for the industry?
We talk about actually and use the term phygital because we see that this is exactly what's happening, and Klarna is one example. I mentioned Apple Pay or Apple now having the cards, and then you have actually the Samsung and all the others following. And was it just yesterday or day before? There is a Verizon, one of the big MNOs in US. They are introducing their payment cards. I still think that there is a lot of touch points with the physical and the digital world, and if you are not able to basically provide services on both, you will lose some of the business, and this is probably the reason why all of the players, and if you look also that, by the way, all these neobanks or mobile only banks, so they started heavily, of course, with their apps, but all of them, they have these cards, and they are nice cards. Actually, they have these vertical cards and all kind of nice designs, and for example, what we see is the metal cards and recycled cards. So these are very, very hot topics for the good reasons that people somehow, let's say, connect themselves for this payment, and maybe it's to themselves, how they kind of reflect themselves on the card. How does it look like? If it's a metal card, it has a nice cling when you drop that one, and it gives a certain maybe prestige for somebody in some countries. So it's a very physical element, finally representing maybe you, but also I would say that there is this security element or element of security, because when you have something physical, it's like a cash. So this is my $1 bill or €1 bill or €5 bill. Instead, that something digitally just happens. So this is the other thing maybe which has impacted the industry and how we also as a consumers behave.
Yeah, and kind of conversely, kind of to throw the ball the other way, what do you think of SumUp's change from kind of physical, and they're now moving into the e-tail space?
Well, I think that as earlier, so physical is still seems that there is, yes, physical touch points. We go and do shopping in the supermarkets and so forth, but more and more the capabilities that are enabling, and especially probably I would say the mobiles, which we carry all the time, having all these apps. The apps are really designed nice way. You can pick and choose things easily, which then kind of brings us to use such a services more and more, which means that really it is a trend toward the online and the digital. And then for some people it's convenience. I mean, I have many of my friends and their families, and especially the ones whether it's a lady of the family or the husband in that family, if they do the grocery shopping, if you have a small kid, so you just want to kind of optimize your time, which means that then you do rather online shopping without spending half an hour driving somewhere, pick and all the stuff, then carry them home, rather than you maybe spend 15 minutes and then it's being home delivered. So I think that these kind of social developments in the society also have a big impact on this trend.
It's really interesting seeing this kind of, as you mentioned in the previous answer, it's phygital. Digital is obviously becoming increasingly way more important, but there is still that physical importance. Thank you so much for your time. I think that's all we actually have time for this episode. So you can catch the rest of the series over at www.fintech.com. To all our viewers, thank you very much for watching. Jukka, thank you for your time. And I hope you had a brilliant time, and catch you next week. See ya.